They said it couldn't be done. The young Marines, full of energy and pride, laughed when the old man stepped onto the range that morning. His back was slightly bent, his uniform a little faded, but his eyes, those steady, battle-tested eyes, still carried the fire of a man who had seen things they could only imagine. He was a retired Marine, a veteran of wars past, long before most of them were even born. They called him Old Man Ray, and when he asked to join them on the firing line, the recruits exchanged amused glances. One of them whispered, "Sir, no offense, but this range record hasn't been broken in 10 years. It's impossible." Ray simply smiled. "Impossible, huh? We used to call that a challenge." The wind was sharp that morning, rolling across the dusty field. Targets were set nearly a mile out, shimmering under the heat. The young Marines were running their drills, taking aim, firing in rhythm. Every shot that landed near the target earned them a pat on the back. They were good, fast, disciplined, precise, but none of them had come close to the record. Ray had been watching them quietly, leaning on his cane, until one of the range officers asked if he wanted to give it a try. The recruits chuckled, thinking it was a joke. "You sure you can even see that far, old-timer?" one of them said with a grin. Ray's eyes narrowed slightly. "Son," he replied, "I was hitting targets farther than that before your daddy learned to shave." The laughter faded. There was something about his tone, calm but commanding, that made them all step back. The officer handed him the rifle. It was a new model, lighter, sleeker than the ones Ray had used in his time. He inspected it carefully, his hands steady despite the years. "Not bad," he murmured, "but it's not the gun that matters. It's the man behind it." The young Marines watched, curiosity slowly replacing their mockery. Ray adjusted the scope, made a few tiny corrections, then lay prone on the ground. The world seemed to quiet down, the breeze slowed, even the recruits stopped talking. He took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered, "For the core." Then he squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the air like thunder. A second later, the spotter shouted, "Dead center." A murmur ran through the group. The next shot came. Again, dead center, and again, and again. Each bullet struck its mark with surgical precision, as if guided by instinct rather than sight. By the fifth shot, no one was laughing anymore. They were watching in awe, their pride dissolving into respect. The officer called for a cease. Fire checked the target through his scope, and then looked back, stunned. "He broke it," he said softly. "He broke the damn record." The recruits broke into applause, some even shouting. Ray just smiled faintly, lowering the rifle. "Told you, boys," he said. "It's not about age, it's about heart. Muscle fades, eyes dim, but a Marine spirit that never dies." They gathered around him, eager to shake his hand, to ask questions, to learn. One young Marine said, "Sir, how did you do that? I mean, the wind, the distance. Nobody's ever hit that clean before." Ray looked at him and replied, "You don't fight the wind, you work with it. You don't aim where the target is, you aim where it's going to be, and most of all, you never let doubt pull the trigger." His words carried the weight of decades of experience, lessons written in blood and sand. He looked around at their faces, young, determined, full of potential, and felt something stir in his chest. "You kids have all the best gear, the best training, but never forget what makes you Marines. It's not the weapon in your hands, it's the will in your heart." The range officer nodded respectfully. "You still got it, sir." Ray chuckled. "Didn't lose it, son. Just hadn't been asked to prove it in a while." They all laughed then, but this time it was different. It was laughter born from admiration, not mockery. Before he left, one of the recruits asked if they could take a picture with him. Ray agreed, standing tall in the center, rifle in hand, the American flag waving behind him. As the camera clicked, a quiet pride filled the air. Later that day, as he walked back toward his truck, cane tapping softly against the dirt, one Marine ran up behind him and called out, "Sir, you taught us something today." Ray turned, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "What's that, son?" That the word can't doesn't belong in a Marine's vocabulary. Ray nodded. "You're damn right." Then he saluted them, a crisp, perfect motion that silenced the field once more. Every Marine there returned the salute, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And long after his truck disappeared down the road, they kept talking about that morning, about the old veteran who walked onto the range and rewrote what was possible. In the years to come, when new recruits joined the Corps and heard the story, it became more than just a tale, it became a lesson. A reminder that greatness doesn't age, that skill doesn't fade, and that the spirit of a Marine once lit burns forever. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in war, they're fought against doubt. And on that dusty range, with a rifle in his hands and fire in his heart, the old veteran proved that it can't be done. Is just another way of saying, watch me. The sun rose over the Marine Corps base, casting long golden lines across the shooting range. The young recruits were already lined up, rifles ready, eyes sharp, and spirits high. They had been training for weeks, trying to break a record that had stood unchallenged for over a decade. The record was considered impossible now, a feat achieved by a legend whose name had long faded from memory. As they prepared for another round, an old truck rolled slowly toward the range. It stopped near the observation post, and out stepped a man who looked like time itself had tried to wear him down but failed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform neatly pressed, though faded by years. His name was Sergeant Major Raymond Cole, retired Marine sniper, a veteran of 3 wars. The recruits turned to look at him, whispering among themselves. One of them, grinning, said, "Hey, old-timer, you here to watch or teach us how it was done back in the dinosaur days?" Laughter broke out, but the old Marine didn't respond. He just gave a small smirk, his piercing blue eyes scanning the range. He had seen this place before, decades ago, when his hair was black and his hands didn't shake from age but from adrenaline. The range officer, a captain barely in his 30s, approached and saluted. "Sir, it's an honor. We didn't know you'd be visiting today." Ray returned the salute slowly. "Just thought I'd see if the new generation still remembers how to shoot straight," he said, his tone half joking, half serious. The captain smiled. "They're trying to break the long-range record. Nobody's come close yet." "That so?" Ray asked, glancing at the distant targets. "Well, records are meant to be broken." One of the younger Marines, eager and a bit cocky, called out, "You think you could hit it, sir?" Ray looked at him for a moment, then said calmly, "I don't think, son, I know." The range fell silent for a beat. The captain laughed softly. "With all respect, sir, that target's at 1.5 miles. No one's hit it clean in years." Ray's expression didn't change. "Then it's overdue." He took off his jacket, laid it neatly on a nearby table, and stepped toward the firing line. The recruits watched as he picked up a modern sniper rifle, something far more advanced than the one he'd used decades ago. He ran his hand along the barrel like an old friend, inspecting the scope, checking the wind direction, feeling the weight. "These new toys make it almost unfair," he said with a small grin. "In my day, we had to feel the wind, not measure it." He lay down in prone position, the world narrowing to the rifle, the target, and the soft breath of the wind. The laughter and whispers around him faded as everyone sensed something shifting in the air. The captain called the range hot. Ray's finger rested on the trigger, his breathing slow, controlled, every muscle still and silent. He whispered under his breath for the Corps. Then came the crack, one single perfect shot that echoed through the valley. The spotter lifted his binoculars, adjusted them, and froze. "Target hit. Center mark," he said in disbelief. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Ray didn't stop. He fired again, another hit, then another, 5 consecutive shots, all dead center, no hesitation, no error. When the final bullet found its mark, the silence broke into cheers and disbelief. The range officer ran over, his eyes wide. "Sir, you just broke the record." Ray slowly stood up, dusting off his uniform. "Broke it," he said quietly. "I just reminded it who said it in the first place." The recruits laughed, but now with admiration, not mockery. The same Marine who had teased him before walked up and said, "Sir, how'd you do that? Nobody's ever been that precise, not with this kind of wind." Ray looked at the young man, his voice steady. "It's not the gun, not the scope, not even the training. It's trust. You trust your breathing, your instincts, your brothers beside you. When you're out there, all you've got is your discipline and your will." He looked toward the horizon, his gaze distant. "And never, ever believe something can't be done. The moment you do, you've already failed." The captain extended his hand, shaking Ray's firmly. "You've still got the touch, sir." Ray smiled. "You don't lose what's in your blood, son. You just need a reason to let it flow again. As he walked back toward his truck, cane tapping lightly against the dirt, one Marine shouted, "Sir, you taught us something today." Ray turned, raising an eyebrow. "What's that? That can't doesn't exist in the Corps." Ray nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like Marines." The recruit stood at attention as he climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling softly. Before driving off, he looked back at them and said, "Remember, boys, a Marine never retires. He just changes his battlefield." The wind picked up again, carrying his words across the range like an echo of history. Long after his truck disappeared, the young Marines remained silent, staring at the distant target, realizing they hadn't just witnessed a record being broken. They had seen the spirit of the Corps in its purest form. Years later, when new recruits arrived, the story of that day became legend. They spoke of the old Marine who walked onto the range, challenged the impossible, and won. They learned that courage isn't measured by age or strength, but by the fire that refuses to die inside a warrior's heart. Sergeant Major Raymond Cole never came back to the base after that day, but his story did. It lived in every shot fired, every oath taken, every Marine who refused to say, "I can't." Because that day, on that dusty range, one man reminded them all that the greatest weapon a Marine ever carries isn't in his hands, it's in his heart.